Sa pagpanaw ni Pope Francis na ngayon ay nasa Basilica ni San Pedro na ang kaniyang katawan, susunod ang naka-schedule na libing at ang pagpili ng Santo Papa sa mga cardinals. At ito ang mga cardinals na posibleng susunod na magiging Santo Papa sa Simbahang Katoliko. Sino ba itong mga cardinals na ito? Ang nakilala na posibleng maluklok kapalit kay Pope Francis. Una, si Cardinal Parolin. Pangalawa, si Cardinal Antonio Tagle. At pangatlo, si Cardinal Turkson. At pang-apat, si Cardinal Erdo. Sila ang matunog na mga pangalan na posibleng papalit sa isagawang conclave matapos sa libing kung sino man ang papalit na magiging Vicar of Christ. Makatutok ang karamihan sa chimney, ang itim na usok, palatandaan na wala pang napili ang mga cardinals. Samantalang kung lalabas ang kulay puti na usok, palatandaan na may bago ng Santo Papa ang Simbahang Katoliko. Pero kailangan ipanalangin natin mga kapatid dahil alam nyo, yung sinabi ni Father Charles Moore na noon pa man meron ng Masonic infiltration sa loob ng simbahan. Kaya meron tayong katanungan. Sumang-ayon ba kayo? Maniwala ba kayo sa sinabi ni Father Charles Moore? Siya ay nagtatrabaho sa Vatican more than 5 years na may infiltration sa Roman Curia sa kalaban ng simbahan, lalo na sa Freemasonry. At ang sabi niya sa pagkamatay ni Pope John Paul I,
in Villa Sciarra on the Janicolo Hill, the Sunday after the Pope's death, I asked that very question to Cardinal Gon. And his answer to me was, there are any number of ways to murder a man. Right? That was exactly his answer. I took it as meaning, yes, but not the way that you would think that he was murdered. There was a lot of talk at that time in Rome about poisoning, that he was poisoned, that John Paul I was poisoned. Gagnon had evidently heard already about the shouting match that went on the night before, the night of his death. Right. So he wasn't so ready to say, to exclude that. So yes, I think he was murdered. Yes, I think he was murdered, but in a different way than people would have guessed at.
Ang katanungan, naniniwala ba siya na pinatay si Blessed John Paul I? Sabi niya, I think he was murdered, pero sa ibang paraan. Sa panong paraan? Sino ang mga posibleng kapalit sa pagiging Vicar of Christ? Samahan ninyo ako. Kasi kinalingan, pag palaging inulit-ulit ay magmukha talagang katotohanan para sa ating mga kapatid na kulang ang kaalaman. Ang pagkadaya ay maranasan sa iba't ibang paraan. Pero napakasakit pag madaya tayo sa pananampalataya dahil nanganib pati ang ating kaluluwa. Viva Cristo Rey! Pro Dio et Ecclesia! Kumusta sa lahat nating mga kapatid na sumusubaybay sa ating live streaming? Muli, ito yung lingkod, Brad Wendell Talimong. At inaniyahan natin ang ating mga suking taga-subaybay. Huwag niyong kalimutan na pindutin ang like sa ating live at huwag din kalimutang i-share ninyo ito. Mag-subscribe sa mga bago pa lang, mag-comment, pindutin ang bell button para updated kayo sa ating talakayan mga kapatid. At meron tayong super chat diyan. Malaking tulong po ang pagtulong ninyo sa super chat mga kapatid at super thanks. Maraming salamat po. At may katanungan tayo batay sa pahayag ni Cardinal Father Charlemore. Kung naniniwala ba kayo na merong nangyaring infiltration sa Roman Curia batay sa kanyang pahayag? So, sa survey natin, yes or no lang yan. Nangunguna dito sa unang pagkakataon ang yes, 83%. No, 17%. Kumusta sa lahat? Si kapatid na Christy Concepcion Sharot, si Duli, si Raymond Gulani. Ako po ang forecast ko sa eleksyon na iyan ay isang super conservative na ma-elect bilang Pope. Ito ang siyang magbago sa lahat ng mga pangungunang binago ng Second Vatican Council. Si Happy Life Vlog, si Pania. Good evening sa lahat, sa iyo, Brother Wendell, si kapatid na Juicy Balabay. Supporter ito palagi ni Father Darwin. Si Ilpidio Acosar. No, good evening, Bro Wendell, from Anunang Sur, Bugo City, Cebu North. Si Rachel sa Dubai. Hello sa ating mga kapatid yan sa Dubai. May katanungan tayo. Naniniwala ba kayo sa sinabi ni Father Charles Moore na may infiltration na nangyari? Yes or no lang yan. No? Mga kapatid, ang sagot. So, bago tayo papasok sa punto por punto, sa pagkakataong ito, sino ba ang mga cardinals? Ito, si magmamasid, Asyano ang papalit na po para matupad ang hula. Si Pania, may nagbalita na si Cardinal Tagle daw ang i-appoint ni Pope Francis. Hindi pwedeng mag-appoint si Pope Francis dahil wala na si Pope Francis. So, pero instead of speculation, ay nanyayahan natin mga kapwa Katoliko na ayuno tayo, mag-prayer tayo para makapili ang College of Cardinals sa kaaya-ayang Papa, no, na papalit sa yumaong si Papa Francisco. Okay. Sino? Pakinggan muna natin ito.
Which cardinal will replace Pope Francis? There is new information that indicates the previous favorite has dropped in the probability of becoming the next pope. Here's the list, if they are considered progressive or conservative candidates, and a comprehensive look on where these cardinals stand.
So, progressive, conservative, ang problema pag infiltrator na progressive ang makapasok. Kaya nga, ipanalangin natin sa banal na espiritu na makapili talaga ng karapat-dapat na Santo Papang mamuno sa Simbahang Katoliko. Okay, tuloy natin. Dahil mula pa sa mga apostolis, tandaan natin, even during the time of Jesus Christ, there was a Judas. At ang ating Panginoon Jesucristo mismo, may babala na kay San Pedro na unang papa. Simon, si Satanas ay nakiusap. Di ba? Babala ng ating Panginoon Jesucristo. At ang mga apostol mismo, Gawa Kapitulo 20, versikulo 29, 30, na mula sa inyo may mga lilitaw na magtuturo ng maling aral. So mula, meaning, ang kalaban ng simbahan, hindi lang sa labas, kundi nasa loob. Sabi ni Heidi Gasman, good evening, Bro Wendell. Yes, mayroon talagang nakapasok na mason or bad spirit kasi kailangan tibayin ang pananampalataya ng sino mang mahal bilang Pope, mahalal bilang Pope. Kaya ipagdasal natin na maghari ang Diyos. Okay, so patuloy natin.
On Catholic issues, such as the ordination of female deacons.
Yan. Mga isyu kung ano ang ipatupad sa susunod na uupong Santo Papa. Meron bang diakonisa na? Payagan ba niyang diakonisa? Yung kontrasepsyon at abortion. Ano ang tindig niyan? Dahil para sa atin talagang demonic ang abortion, demonic ang contraception. Yan namang blessing of same-sex. Ito ang nagiging na resultang humati sa mga iba't ibang mga kapatid dating Katoliko.
Contraception, blessing of same-sex couples, making priestly celibacy optional, communion for divorce and
communion for divorce and remarried Catholics, lalo na yung mga civil wedding ang kanilang tinanggap dahil kahit walang deklarasyon ng simbahan na ito, merong mga pare, mga kapatid, na si Dr. Ditching mismo ang nakarinig na binanatan ang mga CFD sa naturang pare sa ibang diocese. Bakit daw? Dahil mas istrikto pa umano ang CFD kaysa Panginoon dahil hindi pinapayagan yung mga civil wed at live-in ayon sa naturang pare na magkomunyon. Kaya nga, totoo talaga ang paalala sa aklat na ang pamagat. Ito'y ginagamit din ng Iglesia ni Cristo para sa pagchap-chap. Ang pamagat sa mga kaparian ang pinalanggang anak sa mahal na birhen. May nihil obstat ni Monsignor Adelito Abilia, imprimator ni Cardinal Ricardo Vidal sa pahina 24, kahit sa aking mga kaparian ay marami na ang hindi naniniwala, ngunit nananatili pa rin sila sa simbahan. Tunay silang mga lubo na nagsusuot ng damit topa at dinala nila sa kapahamakan ang hindi na mabilang na kaluluwa. Yun ang private revelation na pahayag ng mahal na Birhen Maria. Kaya pagdasal talaga natin, mga kapatid, ang takbo sa Papal Conclave.
Married Catholics and others. At number 1 is Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who is
si Cardinal Pietro Parolino. Dahil sa kanyang mga connection din at bilang Secretary of State sa Vatican, so malawak ang kanyang connection. Pero ano po ba ang kanyang mga prinsipyo kaugnay sa aral ng simbahan.
70 years old and is of Italy. He is the new favorite to become the next pope according to most odds makers at 20%.
Yun, ang batay sa survey daw, nangunguna si Cardinal Parolin na posible. Sa survey lang yan ha.
He is the Vatican's Secretary of State and is seen as a continuation of Pope Francis's legacy. Many see him as a progressive.
So, siya ay nakilala na isang progresibong kardinal. Dahil 2 ore. At yung progresibo, diyan posible ang mga nakapasok na tinatawag na infiltrator. Yung progresibo at yung conservative. 2 ore yan mga kapatid. Tuloy natin.
Where does he stand on the issues? For the ordination of women, in an official letter dated October 23, 2023, addressed the German Bishops' Conference regarding the German Synodal Way, Cardinal Parolin stated that the ordination of women to the priesthood is non-negotiable and is not up for discussion with German.
So, ibig sabihin, kahit progressive siya, this is ang ayon sa ordination sa mga kababaihan na magiging pare.
Bishops.
Kung maalala ninyo sa ibang religion, sa Anglican, sa religion, lalo na sa grupo ng IFI dito sa Pilipinas, meron na silang bishop na pare, bishop na babae, meron na silang pare na babae.
His stance on blessing of same-sex couples is ambiguous. He stressed that such a change must be faithful to the Church's tradition and heritage.
So, di pa malinaw umano ang panindigan niya kaugnay dyan.
Must be progress and continuity. On making priestly celibacy optional, Cardinal Parolin has said that celibacy could theoretically be discussed, although he notes the advantages to priests remaining celibate. As Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin is an advocate of climate science and has frequently called for global efforts to combat climate change.
Yan ang mga tinitira sa mga conservative kaugnay sa climate change, mga kapatid. Dahil ayon sa mga conservative din na ang climate change ay isang propaganda sa population control.
What about contraception? Although Cardinal Parolin has described the encyclical Humanae Vitae as prophetic in foreseeing ethical challenges to traditional family structures, he also took part in a book presentation held by those who would like to see the Church change Humanae Vitae's teachings on contraception.
So, ibig sabihin, kahit pa naniniwala siya na prophetic ang Humanae Vitae ni Pope St. Paul VI, pero may panindigan siya na dapat magbago na daw umano. So, ibig ba sabihin na pahintulutan na ang contraception sa mga Catholics kung sakaling siya ang magiging papa? Tuloy natin.
For communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, he is in favor of it.
So, sa communion ng mga divorce at sa mga remarried Catholics, payag siya na patanggapin ng communion yan. At kahit si Cardinal David, nung nag-lecture siya sa amin, na bishop pa siya, ay pabor siya na yung divorce ay patanggapin ng komunyon, tulad sa nangyari umano sa kanyang kapatid, na ang kanyang kapatid hindi na babae, hindi papayag na i-divorce sa kanyang asawa, ngunit ang kanyang asawa mismo, para lang makakita ng ibang babae, nag-divorce. So, sa naturang situation, sabi niya ay dapat yung kapatid niya na hindi naman sumang-ayon sa divorce, maliban lang sa asawa nito na siya ang nanguna, ay makatanggap ng komunyon.
He has expressed support for wider access to the sacraments, specifically for civilly remarried divorcees, seeing it as a part of a new paradigm for the Church of accompanying and listening. Parolin played a key role in negotiating the Vatican's highly controversial agreement with China on the appointment of bishops, a move aimed at fostering dialogue despite criticism from some conservative factions. He has also endorsed Pope Francis's outreach to marginalized communities and emphasizes the importance of dialogue and inclusivity. On topics such as LGBTQ rights and divorced Catholics, Parolin advocates for a balance between upholding church teachings and extending pastoral care. On the highly controversial German synodal way, Parolin has firmly opposed certain heterodox positions of the synodal way and the creation of a permanent council, but he has not condemned the process in itself. At number 2 is Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle,
Si Cardinal Tagle.
who is 67 years old and is from the Philippines. He was the previous favorite, but is now listed at an 18% chance of becoming the next pope.
So, si Parolin, 20% batay sa survey nila. Pero si Cardinal Tagle, 18%.
He's also seen as a more progressive voice in the church.
So, kinikilala din si Cardinal Tagle na progressive na tinig sa simbahan versus conservative, no? Traditional ang conservative, mga kapatid. So, si Cardinal Tagle, kinikilala siyang progressive.
Where does he stand on the issues? On ordaining women to the diaconate, Cardinal Tagle has not made a public statement about ordaining women to the diaconate.
So, silent si Cardinal Tagle kaugnay sa pag-ordina ng babae na magiging diakonisa.
He served on a Vatican committee which determined that a ministry of deaconesses did indeed exist. This ministry was not perceived as simply the feminine equivalent of the masculine diaconate. On the blessing of same-sex couples, he is ambiguous.
So, di malinaw din kung ano talaga ang panindigan ni Cardinal Tagle kaugnay dyan.
The pro-LGBTQ group, New Ways Ministry, has said Tagle has a generally pro-LGBTQ record, having previously spoken out against harsh words against LGBTQ Catholics. This factor, together with Cardinal Tagle's generally progressive pro-Francis stances, makes it very possible he supports the blessing of same-sex couples, but his precise position is unclear. On priestly celibacy, Cardinal Tagle has spoken of the need for open-minded discussions about it. Cardinal Tagle is in favor of the controversial Vatican-China Secret Accord. He defends the agreement with China on the appointment of bishops, saying its purpose is to safeguard the valid apostolic succession and the sacramental nature of the Catholic Church in China. He is a strong supporter of Pope Francis's environmental encyclical about climate change and protecting the earth. Cardinal Tagle is in favor of reassessing Humanae Vitae. His approach to the encyclical aligns with a broader trend within parts of the Church's current leadership to reread and contextualize Humanae Vitae in light of contemporary issues and to give it a more pastoral emphasis. For communion for divorced and remarried Catholics, instead of offering a clear yes or no answer, Cardinal Tagle holds that every situation for those who are divorced and remarried is quite unique. A general rule, he added, might be counterproductive in the end. My position at the moment is to ask, can we take every case seriously, and is there, in the tradition of the Church, paths toward addressing each case individually? This is one issue that I hope people will appreciate is not easy to say no or yes to. We cannot give one formula to all. Tagle often uses the pulpit to respond to issues of social justice, but his positions on moral matters appear somewhat incoherent. On the one hand, he railed against a Filipino reproductive health bill, albeit less strongly than some of his fellow bishops, that introduce anti-family and anti-life policies, and he has spoken strongly against abortion and euthanasia. On the other hand, he holds that some situations exist where universal moral principles do not apply, as in the case of communion for couples who live together but without sacramental marriage, and issues relating to homosexuality. He opposes use of harsh or severe language when describing certain sins and believes the Church needs to learn over its teachings of mercy, due in part to the shifts in cultural and social sensibilities. In short, he downplays the gravity of such sins and the public scandal that they give. At number 3 is Cardinal Peter Turkson, who is 76 years old and is from Ghana. He stands at a 14% chance of becoming the next pope.
Sa survey lang yan, 14%, no, na maging papa.
He is also known for his progressive views to Catholic issues. Where does he stand on the issues? For women deacons, Cardinal Turkson has affirmed the important role women play in the Church.
So, kinikilala din siyang progressive mas marami ang progressive kaysa conservative daw.
but has also said that limiting holy orders to men does not discriminate against women. On the blessing of same-sex couples, in 2021, Turkson supported a Vatican declaration against the blessing of same-sex couples, but he has not spoken either for or against the Vatican's later declaration, which approved of non-liturgical blessings. Should priests be able to marry? He says yes. The Cardinal has framed removing the requirements of clerical
So, pabor siya na mag-asawa ang pare.
celibacy as one of the many solutions to the shortage of priestly vocations. Turkson has a strong focus on climate change, seeing it through the lens of integral ecology. On communion for divorced and remarried Catholics, he has been ambiguous. Although he has not addressed the issue directly, his alignment with Pope Francis on other issues might suggest a more pastoral and case-by-case approach. While condemning abortion and euthanasia, he is permissive regarding the use of contraceptives in certain circumstances. And despite his close interaction with United Nations officials and affiliations over the years, he has generally steered clear of publicly warning against reproductive health policies, that is, abortion and contraception, which the UN fiercely promotes. At number 4 is Cardinal Peter Erdo, who is 72 years old and is from Hungary. He is now at a 13% chance of becoming the next pope. He is conservative,
Si Cardinal Erdo ay very conservative.
a former president of the Council of Bishops' Conferences of Europe, and he is known for his traditionalist views. On the blessing of same-sex couples, he has firmly rejected the Church's position that there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely aligned to God's plan for marriage and family. Cardinal Erdo has always been a staunch defender of the unitive and procreative ends of marriage, seeing openness to life as an intrinsic requirement of love. He has called for Humanae Vitae's openness to life to be rediscovered, and has made no call for it to be revisited. Cardinal Erdo has stressed that civilly remarried Catholics can only receive communion if they abstain from sexual relations, in line with the teaching of Pope St. John Paul II. During the Synod on the Family, at which he was Relator General, Erdo issued a report stressing that any pastoral approach must not compromise the truth of marriage's indissolubility. When Pope Francis in 2016 announced that every priest would be able to forgive the sin of having an abortion, a decision which was originally limited to the duration of the Year of Mercy, Cardinal Erdo welcomed the decision, considering it as a great pastoral help and an expression of mercy. At the same time, he reiterated the inerrant teaching of the Church and emphasized that the Pope's decision did not change the theological considerations about the grave sinfulness of abortion.
So, sa ipinakita ng mga kandidato sa pagka papa, kung sino sa kanila, sa apat na ito mga kapatid, sa akin na side, para sa akin mas pabor ako kay Cardinal Erdo, na isang very conservative, traditional. Pero panalangin natin talaga.
Please pray for the future of our church.
Panalangin natin ang future ng ating simbahan, lalo na yung sinabi ni Father Charles Moore na may infiltration. Nagtatrabaho sa loob ng Vatican si Father Charles Moore at nagiging kasama kaibigan niya si Cardinal Edward Gagnion ang nag-imbestiga kaugnay sa missionary in the Roman Curia. Pakinggan muna natin siya.
These two cardinals went to the Pope, and the cardinals' names were Cardinal Staffa, Staffa, who was the head of the Segnatura Apostolica, the Supreme Court of the Catholic Church, and Cardinal Oddi, ODDI, Silvio Oddi, who was a great man. He was later on...
So, itong dalawang cardinal, yung Chief Justice sa Roma, si Cardinal estafa at si Cardinal Odi ang pumunta at nakiusap kay Saint Paul VI kaugnay sa Freemasonry sa Roman Curia.
In charge of the clergy, the Congregation for the Clergy. Those two cardinals.
So si Cardinal Oji sa Congregation for Clergy siya.
Don't ask me how, because I don't know how. There are many theories how they got this document, but they did get the document. It was given to Cardinal Staffa as Supreme Court Justice. Mm-hmm. He asked Interpol and a couple other private sector investigation teams to investigate it before he brought it to the Pope's attention. He wanted it authenticated. He wanted to know, is this, did somebody make this up? Was this planted? What is it? It was authenticated. And what was authenticated was his membership in Freemasonry, in Italian Freemasonry. Okay?
It's a big deal. I mean, people say, why do you go to Latin Mass? I said, well, I don't want to pray the prayers of Freemasons. I want to pray the prayers of saints, church fathers.
And Taylor, let me put it this way too. Let me just tell this.
Sa interview nila ni Dr. Taylor.
This too. Most of your audience, a great number anyway, are Americans. And I don't think Americans understand what that means, the Masonic Lodge and Freemasonry. At least I didn't when I got to Rome first. I thought they were...
So di basta-basta talaga ang Freemasonry, mga kapatid. Pero ang daming mga nagsisimba na ang mga sasakyan ay may logo ng Masonry. Sa 1983 Canon Law 1374, ang nakasulat, membership in Masonry is forbidden to all Catholics, and that membership is a serious sin which automatically denies Holy Communion to any Catholic who joins them. So, yon.
Funny little men who ran around little cars with fezzes on their heads during parades. The Shriners. This was it. That was all I had to know about Freemasons. In Europe, Freemasonry is a big deal. The point was that these two cardinals then they brought the documentation to the Pope and said, Holy Father, there.
Bakit ganon? Lalo na sa Italy. Sa kanilang aklat na mabasa, may akda ni Albert Pike yan. Albert Pike was a Grand Commander of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Nakasulat, at meron akong isang parang Biblia nila na isinukod, sinunog dahil ginamit ko as ebidensya. Eto mga kapatido, Lucifer is God. And unfortunately, Adonai, the Hebrew God of the Bible, is also God. The true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. Nako, delikado, di po ba?
This is the man who's revamping the entire liturgy and the new mass and anyway, there was a lot of anti-Bugnini sentiment already in Rome. Mm-hmm. But this proof was not there.
Si Bugnini na naka-assign sa pagbago sa mga liturgy sa simbahan, lalo na sa misa, ay nakitaan ng mga ebidensya sa paring order of preacher na may mga dokumento sa Freemasonry.
Brought it to the Pope. They brought it to the Pope, and this is before 1974. Okay?
Okay.
But in 1974, the Pope Paul VI, for whatever reason, he was moved at that time. He called in Benelli and asked Benelli his opinion about doing a visitation, a papal visitation. not only about the affair of Bugnini, because when he got that documentation, Bugnini was ousted from the Vatican.
Yeah.
Right, almost immediately. So that was in '74 because he was promoted to a nuncio in Iran I believe in January 1975.
Yun daw ang isa sa mga paraan upang tanggalin ka, i-promote sa ibang posisyon.
So he knew about it at the end of 1974. He was taken out. They're not mutually exclusive. Let me put it that way. If they were found in a briefcase, I've that story often too, then those were the documents that were given to Cardinal Staffa.
Right.
All right. I don't, as I said when I was beginning this, I don't know their origins. I don't know exactly how they got to him. I do know that they got to him. They got to Cardinal Staffa. They were on his desk. He picked up the documents, read them through carefully, and started the investigation. The investigation took almost a year. His own investigation, make sure that they were legit, right? They were so legit that Bugnini was ousted, and the Pope, that shook him to the point that he asked Benelli.
Si Father Charles Moore, may personal knowledge siya dahil kasama siya ni Cardinal Edward Gagnon na nag-imbestiga kung sino itong mga infiltrators na nakapasok sa Roman Curia.
To organize a visitation, a papal visitation of the entire Roman Curia.
Roman Curia, ibig sabihin, ang core government ng simbahan.
Right? Now, this is one big deal.
Big deal.
This is what the Pope is saying is, I want my own government investigated from A to Z. So you're talking about more or less, I don't know, let me say 600 people, 800 people who formed that government, that central government of the church in all of its capacities. The Roman Curia itself, the committees, everything. Now the Benelli absolutely agreed. Yes, Holy Father, we'll do that. To find who would be the visitor. And that visitor is to represent the Pope himself in the visitation, right? Well, Benelli suggested, he said, I think I know the man for it. He said, the man would be Edward Gagnon, Monsignor Gagnon, who's already a bishop, Bishop Gagnon. There are many priests, and this is a problem.
Before naging cardinal siya, archbishop siya. O Bishop Gagnon.
This is a problem that has to be, I really wish we were dealing with problems like this rather than the nonsense that's going on today. Problems of priests losing their faith. This is true.
So, yun, ang problema, yung mga pari na nawalan umano ng pananampalataya. May mga paring nawalan ng pananampalataya. Dito na papasok ang nakasulat sa naturang aklat na may imprimatur ni Cardinal Vidal, kahit sa aking mga kaparian marami na ang hindi naniniwala, ngunit nanatili pa rin sila sa simbahan. Tunay silang mga lubo na nagsusuot ng damit topa at dinala nila sa kapahamakan ang hindi mabilang na kaluluwa. So tuloy natin si Father Moore.
It's a real problem. And especially careerists who lose their faith. They lose their faith in exchange for a higher career. This is it's horrible. And all of a sudden these people, look at the irony is horrific. These kinds of people are the superiors of people who believe in God.
Yeah.
This is what you're ending up with in many cases, right? Not always, but in many cases. Let me say this too. In the Vatican, in my years working there, 5 years working there and 9 years living in Rome, I met saints and sinners. I met some real saints.
5 taon nagtrabaho sa Vatican, 9 na taon na naninirahan doon, at sabi niya may nakilala siya at nakitang mga santo at mga makasalanan
Working in the Vatican. Seriously.
na nagtatrabaho sa Vatican.
Devout men who were committed to their work. Anyway, Cardinal Gon was called in, commissioned by the Pope to begin this investigation. This was one big deal. Believe me, Rome talked about nothing else other than the Gon investigation. It's funny today, you mentioned it, people, they don't know what you're talking about, but it went on for 3 years. Cardinal Gon, or Archbishop Gon at the time, talked to everybody who worked in the Vatican, everyone, from top to bottom. And he came up with a lot of incredible conclusions after 3 years. One of the major problems that he discovered immediately was in the Congregation for Bishops. Why is that important?
Yan, sa 3 taon, mahigit na investigasyon niya, isang archbishop, isang kardinal ang lumitaw na positibong miyembro ng Freemasonry.
Again, for people who don't know exactly the structure of the church or how it works, bishops are pivotal to our Catholic faith. They are the successors of the apostles. Whether they're worthy or not worthy, that's not the point. They are the successors of the apostles. We began with 12 apostles, one who wasn't worthy at all. Okay, so they began with unworthy candidates also. But the man who creates those bishops is the most important man for many of us in the Catholic Church. Because at that time, during the 1970s,
Sa panahon ni Saint Paul VI, nakaupo itong kardinal na siya ang responsable sa pagpili kung sino ang magiging obispo. Hindi lang sa panahon ni Pope Paul VI, hanggang sa panahon ni Saint John Paul II. At matagal siyang natanggal.
a number of things were happening. Paul VI had just put out a decree that every bishop had to resign or present his resignation at age 75. Now, again, let me explain to the people who are listening what that means. Prior to that,
So noon, ang obispo, tulad sa Santo Papa, kung saan siya na-assign, walang resignation hanggang sa kanyang kamatayan.
a bishop was a bishop if he lived to be 107. He was the bishop of his diocese. He was not removed. He didn't resign. He didn't retire unless he was absolutely incapacitated. Only for that reason would his resignation be taken. Why? Because he was a church father. Mm-hmm. The bishop was the bishop. I mean, these were serious things, right? It's like a pope not resigning. It right. just wasn't done.
Or a king.
Because once you're in, that's it, right? Now, Pope Paul VI decided with this aggiornamento, this updating of everything, he bought into an awful lot of the philosophy of the world. Rather than the church teaching the world, the church decided after the Second Vatican Council to learn from the world. This has been the major problem. We don't need to learn from the world. We know what the world is about. The world needs to learn, right? Well, Pope Paul VI decided to modernize the church in this sense that when a man got to be 75 years old, that was old enough, he should resign. Now, it was up to the Pope to whether to accept his resignation or not. He could go up to age 80, right? If the Pope wanted to keep him in there. What does this do? This meant that the majority of bishops were being changed. The entire episcopate was being remade in the 1970s. I don't have it in front of me, but I wish somebody would look it up. There was an article, an interview that Time magazine gave to Nuncio, at that time it was called the Apostolic Delegate, Jadot, a Belgian, amazing, the only son of a Belgian diamond miner from Africa. The man was worth millions and millions of dollars. They made him nuncio to the United States, or apostolic delegate to the United States. He gave, when he resigned, when he left, he gave an interview to Time magazine, and his greatest achievement, according to him, was having left the United States with 70, it was either 75 or 78 new liberal bishops. It was
Yan, kung sasabihin liberal bishops, ibig sabihin mga progressive bishops. Ano yung example ng progressive bishops? No? Marami. Kahit yung nagiging professor namin sa seminaryong naging obispo na, grabe ka progressive.
Very proud of this. Right? They were liberal bishops. Right? Well, that was the beginning of the end. Thank you. That was the beginning of the end. All of a sudden, you have now these men who are CEOs, because
Kaya di tayo magtaka kung bakit may mga obispo na di maniniwala sa demonic possession kahit sila'y exorcist. Sila mismo ang exorcist sa diocese. Okay, tuloy natin. Bunga sila sa progresibo.
many of them are more CEOs, you know, that than bishops. They're not worried about their flocks. They're worried about other things, stocks and bonds, right? And finances. What they did was change the entire episcopate, not just in the United States, in the entire world.
Right.
And in the entire world, new liberal bishops were put in place. And this changed everything. Now, who was the man in charge of creating bishops?
Yan. Sino ang in charge? Yun ang lumabas sa resulta sa pagturo ng mga bagong obispo. Yun ang lumabas na resulta na ang in charge sa prefect sa Congregation of Bishops ay isang miyembro ng Italian Freemasonry.
One man. His name was Sebastian Cardinal Baggio, Baggio. I was in his presence one time in an elevator with him, going up to the congregation for bishops, actually, to see somebody else, not him. He and I were the only people in the elevator going up. It might have been me. I'm sure it was. I felt freezing cold, and it was in July. I couldn't wait to get out of the elevator. There was something.
Iba talaga ang kaniyang pakiramdam. Nagsama sila ng dalawa sa elevator, mga kapatid. Pero para kay Father Charles Moore, meron talagang demonyo daw.
There was a wickedness. I was going to say evil, but no, I don't think that's too harsh a word. It's not too harsh a word. Something evil about him, and you felt it. He was the one in charge of making all of the bishops. Well, lo and behold, in 1975, Cardinal Gagnon, it comes to Cardinal Gagnon, the proof that Baggio also belongs to Italian Freemasonry. Baggio is naming liberal bishops to Japan, to France.
So, ibig sabihin, yung sa panahon ni Cardinal Sebastian Baggio, pag ang isang pare ay very traditional, no? Kung ang isang pare, lalo na tulad ni Father Darwin na exorcist at naniniwala ng demonic possession, di siya pwedeng magiging bishop. Maliban lang sa mga pare na hindi naniniwala nito, yung mga progresibong pare, pwede siyang magiging obispo.
Everybody who held any idea of Catholic tradition, orthodoxy in that sense, was not a candidate.
Yes, may nagsabi dito, I prefer Cardinal Sara. Yes, Cardinal Sara. Pero ipanalangin natin dahil mas marami ang progressive kumpara sa conservative, yung traditional. Traditionist.
Gagnon discovered this, and Gagnon went immediately with that discovery to the Holy Father. Right? Immediately. And said, there's something very wrong and very serious, and it has to be. He said, I haven't finished with the investigation, but I'm telling you right now, this has to be addressed yesterday. Right? Good. Gagnon is still living at the Canadian College, and his rooms are all of a sudden ransacked.
Jose, habang isinagawa niya ang investigation kung sino itong mga infiltrator sa loob ng simbahan, lalo na sa Roman Curia, niransak ang kanyang room doon sa tinitirhan niya at ninakaw ang ilang mga dokumento.
He's getting death threats, serious ones, at his office. And his office in San Callisto, you know, the offices in San Callisto, next to Santa Maria in Trastevere. There's a big Vatican office building in San Callisto for the Committee for the Family, and he was also the president of the Committee of the Family. His offices were ransacked at night. They were broken into, looking for his work.
Right.
So Gagnon gets in touch with Mario Marini, and he tells this to Marini, and Marini says, well, why don't you come and live with us? So with Charlie and me, come and live with us. We're the only two. He said, well, he started laughing.
So sila na ang nagsama para sa safety.
We do have someone else in the house who would ensure your safety to the utmost degree. He said, well, we just happened to get the Syrian Archbishop of Jerusalem as a permanent resident in the house. Who is the Syrian Archbishop of Jerusalem? His name is Hilario Capucci.
Yan. Isa din yan sa lumabas sa investigasyon ni Cardinal Edward Gagnon na miyembro ng Freemasonry. Etong si Capucci na isang patriarka at nahuli doon sa Israel dahil nagbibinta ng mga baril.
Who is he? He had just been released from Israeli prison. He was charged, tried, and convicted of smuggling arms to the Palestinian Liberation Organization while Archbishop of Jerusalem. He used his car that had diplomatic plates to transport arms to them. So the Israelis put him in jail, and Syria, he was from Syria.
So dito batay sa pahayag ni Cardinal Charles Moore na Father Charles Moore na nagtatrabaho sa Vatican, dito natin makita na even sa modernong panahon, meron ding mga modernong Judas.
Syria sent planes over, I believe it was every Thursday afternoon, to drop bombs around the prison as protest that he was in prison, right? So finally the Israelis, you know, it sounds like I'm going all over the place with this, right? I'm sorry, but it's not an easy story to tell. The Israelis got sick and tired of this, and they got into the house. So I came home from the Gregorian University one night and could not get into our house because there were protests outside. I mean, hundreds of people outside of our house. We lived in a little a back street that was always a quiet little place in a beautiful little neighborhood, right? Couldn't get through. The Italian police were there. Israeli agents were there. Syrian agents from the Syrian government, from the embassy, were there. And after the whole crowd dispersed the night he came, those three, at least two of those, there was a van and a car, never left the area. The Israelis had a van there watching every move he made. And the Syrians had a van there watching every move the Israelis were making. So we lived in the safest place, the safest house in all of Europe. In all of Europe. We had guards with machine guns standing outside the door, right? So Gagnon and Mario Marini said to Gagnon, "You want safety? Nobody can kill you in our house. You can't even get in without being frisked." So Gagnon moved in with us for his own safety. It was great. And we lived together for 2 years, and it was fantastic. He finished his study, and then when he was finished, he asked me to drive him. I helped him. People think that I was his secretary and I know all of the dossier, everything. I don't. He was very private. He was very professional about that. But he asked me at the end to help him file things because he had 3 different sections of the dossier that he had. It wasn't just one with 3 parts. To help file, and then would I drive him to the audience he had with Pope Paul VI to hand in these documents, the result of his 3-year study of the Roman Curia. Now, so what he's going to do is tell the Pope, here are the people who are working for you. Right. These are the people you put in power. And that's it. So I said, absolutely. So I drove him. He's got the file on his lap. We drove him around I can still see where we're going down the Via Aurelia, Aurelia Vaticana de Mure, and we get down to the Holy Office. We go through. We get into the San Damaso, and he goes up the elevator, and I wait for him to come down. He's going to see Pope Paul and hand in this whole result of the investigation, and he's convinced that there's going to be sweeping changes in the Vatican. He's convinced of this. I mean, so was I. If you're the one who's doing the investigation and you're an archbishop and you're convinced, who am I not to be convinced, right? He came down after an audience with the Pope. Desanimado. How do you say that? Discouraged. Very discouraged. He got into the car. I said, well, what happened? He said, I handed everything to the Pope on his desk. I said, here are the results. Here's the results. Here are the documents for this whole study. And here are my recommendations in a smaller, they were a thinner thing. The Pope pushed everything back to him. The Pope said to him, I can't deal with this. Leave it for my successor. Right? You know, Gagnon is a faithful Catholic and a papist to the bone, through and through. But he came down and said, leave it for his successor. I mean, what kind of a thing is that? It's taken me 3 years. Half the people I know no longer speak to me.
Right.
I mean, the divisions and everything else, just for asking questions. Well, to cut him a little bit of slack, this was when Aldo Moro was kidnapped and brutally murdered, tortured and murdered. And Aldo Moro was prime minister of Italy, head of the Democrazia Cristiana, and a very close friend of Paul VI. They were close friends. His kidnapping, torture, and murder really took a toll on Paul VI. Anyway, Gagnon is down in the car again with the dossier, with all of the documentation. And he's explaining this to me, and he's not happy. Let me just put it that way. We went back home. And 2 months later, 2.5 months later, the Pope is dead on August 6th, 1978. All right. I'm not going to bore you with the whole detail of the election. You know, there was an election. There were two candidates at that time. Gagnon told me, and Marini told me. This is before the conclave. He said it's.
So, ito ay pagkamatay na ni Saint Paul VI, no? Sino ang magiging kandidato o naging kandidato sa pagkapapa?
Either going to be, he said, as much as I would like Benelli to be elected, he said, Benelli has a lot of enemies. He said, it's between Luciani and Wojtyła from Krakow, very good man, good friend of Benelli's. And I said, well, how do you know this? He said, because Benelli is going to propose them as candidates. First, Luciani, and if Luciani doesn't fly in the conclave, they don't vote for him, then the candidate will be Wojtyła. That's fine. Exactly that happened. The problem was this, during the conclave, and I'll try to keep this brief. I know I'm going all over the place, and I'm sorry for that. But during the conclave, there emerged various candidates. One of them was Cardinal Joseph Siri of Genoa. Another one was
who would have been considered very conservative.
Sebastian Baggio.
Oh,
Yon, si Cardinal Sebastian Baggio during sa sa eleksyon pagkamatay ni Pope Paul VI, nagiging kandidato pa siya, no? Sebastian Baggio. Nagiging kandidato siya sa pagka Santo Papa. So, delikadong siya ay manalo, kaya may aksyon na ginawa sila si Cardinal Binini kaugnay dito.
A Freemason.
Well, by the way, Baggio presented himself as a conservative. He was very, very close to the Opus Dei.
So, si Baggio na isang Italian Mason ay nagpakilala ding conservative at kaibigan siya sa mga Opus Dei.
They had him at all of their celebrations, and he was blessing everything, and loved very, yes, oh yes, we have to do everything by the book. In the meantime, he's destroying the church with the nominations he's sending out as new bishops, right? Anyway, you've got three candidates: Siri of Genoa, Baggio, and Benelli. Well, this is where Taylor, this is where we conservatives shoot ourselves in the foot. Okay, often we do this to ourselves. Siri saw that he couldn't win. He could not win. It was he received the greatest amount of votes, but it stopped there. Nobody else was going over to his side. At the same time, seeing this, Benelli says, "Gentlemen, let me propose a candidate."
Yan. Ito ang nangyari sa pagpili ni John Paul I, mga kapatid. Tumindig si Cardinal Benelli at sinabi niya na ini-encourage niya yung mga bumoto sa kanya, siya mismo ay pipili ng kandidato. At sino yan ang kandidato sa pagiging papa?
That I would give all of my votes to, and I think most of you would give your votes to, Cardinal Luciani of Venice.
Yon, si Cardinal Luciani, the smiling Pope, ang pumili sa pangalang Pope John Paul I.
Well, people looked around. He was president of the Italian Episcopal Conference, a well-educated man, a humble man, saintly man. People knew him. He won the election. That was done because this is where I said we conservatives and often shoot ourselves in the foot. rather than give up his own votes, he would have let a Freemason become Pope. Rather than, serious.
So ano kaya ang resulta kung ang lumabas sa investigasyon na si Cardinal Sebastiano Baguio na isang Freemasonry, Italian missionary ang magiging Santo Papa?
All Siri had to do was say, you know what? Let me give some votes to Benelli. He wouldn't do that. So the only thing, the solution was Benelli out of his hat pulled that rabbit, and it was agreed on. Everyone agreed on, and he was a great candidate, and I believe he would have made a good pope. Right? Came down to this: every pope. John Paul II did not do this, and we'll keep.
Sandali muna. May nabasa ko ni Romeo, kaya according to Siri thesis, Cardinal Siri was elected Pope in 1958. That is only a Siri theory, yung tinatawag na the Red Pope. Ang mga nagtuturo diyan ang tinatawag na sede vacante, dahil ang paniniwala nila si Cardinal Siri daw umano ang nakaupo na papa, pinalitan ni Cardinal Roncalli na gumamit sa pangalang Pope John 23rd. Yun po ay tinatawag na the Red Pope theory thesis. Theory lang yan, no? Theory, it needs to be proven. Pero tandaan natin, during the time sa pag-upo ni John 23rd, kung si Siri ang napili na kandidato elected pero pinalitan, but siya ay nakapila kasama ang mga cardinals para magbigay pugay sa bagong elected na papa. So, yung sinabi nilang napili, pinalitan, para yan sa mga nagturo ng sede vacante, no? Huwag agad-agad maniwala sa ganyan.
That in our memory, to look at the problems that he himself caused himself by not doing this. Every pope, when a pope is elected, he decides his new government, right? Like we do it. Can you imagine Trump winning the election and accepting Biden's Secretary of State?
No,
it's insane, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, so the first thing that the new Pope John Paul, he took the name John Paul for Pope John the 23rd and Paul the 6th. Good.
Kinumbahin niya si John 23rd at Paul the 6th, kaya John Paul.
The first thing that he did was he asked Benelli to be his Secretary of State.
Yan, si Cardinal Benelli, dahil napakatalino ito si Cardinal Benelli, no? Kandidato ito sa pagiging papa, dahil pero nanganib na mas sa votation lulusot si Sebastiano Baguio na isang Freemasonry, ang kaniyang buto at taga-suporta, hinikayat niya na doon kay Cardinal Luciani buboto. Kaya pumasok si Luciani na papa at pinili ang pangalang John Paul I.
Now, from Florence, Benelli is a cardinal from that would have been a team. That would have been a team like you've never seen, right? Benelli said that he would. Now you've got Villot, who's
we
still
haven't talked
the
about
Secretary of
Villot
State for the time being.
Yeah.
Villot handed in his resignation,
Oh.
but it hasn't been accepted yet.
Okay.
Because Benelli put a caveat. He put a condition: you get rid of Baggio, get Baggio out of the Congregation for Bishops, get him out.
Sa panahon na ito ni Cardinal Luciani na napili sa pagka Pope John Paul I, ang request ni Cardinal Benele, tanggapin niya na magiging Secretary of State siya sa Vatican provided na si Cardinal Sebastiano Baguio ay tanggalin diyan sa Roman Curia.
And I'll come in. Baggio was a holy terror. He
Yeah.
was a strong man. No nonsense.
Imagine, si Baguio, kinikilalang the Holy Terror.
He took no enemies, right? And Benelli said, it's up to you. This has to be the first mark of your pontificate. You show business that way. You'll get respect. What to do? We've explained before that to eliminate, you promote in many of the Vatican circumstances. Well, they were going to promote Baggio. But the Holy Father does this. He calls in Gagnon, and Benelli said, call in Gagnon immediately, get that report.
Okay, so binasa niya ang report ni Cardinal Edward Gagnon tungkol sa Infiltrator sa Roman Curia.
He said, you'll see exactly who's who and what's what. Get the report. Again, I drove Gagnon back to the Vatican. Again, he goes upstairs, hands in the report. The Pope studied that report very thoroughly. They say that he died with a copy of the Imitation of Christ. Believe me, if anything, he died with some of the pages of Cardinal Gagnon's proposed changes to the Curia.
Right.
Anyway, it's decided that the Pope decides what he would do is send Baggio to Venice.
Yan, advice din ito ni Cardinal Benelli na ilagay si Sebastiano Cardinal Baguio sa Venice dahil ito si Pope John Paul I, galing yan sa Venice, no? Patriarka siya sa Venice. Dahil doon sa Venice, may strong curia siya na pwedeng magbantay kay Cardinal Sebastiano Baguio.
He's a cardinal, so you can't mistreat a cardinal. Send him to Venice. He's getting his due place. And in Venice, Luciani has auxiliary bishops and monsignors who run the curia and everything else. They could take care of Baggio. He'd have him surrounded by the enemy, right, and controlled. Right. Pope Pius X did the same thing. He had two cardinals he didn't trust at all, and he gave them positions in the Vatican so that in every procession into St. Peter's Basilica, any occasion they were right in front of him. And somebody said, "But they bother you. Why do you keep them so close?" He said, I keep them so close, I want to be watching exactly every move they make. That's why they're close, right? So the thing was to send Baggio out of the Congregation for Bishops to Venice. So the Holy Father calls Baggio. Now, and you've got to imagine that Baggio got wind of this, okay? Because things don't happen in the Vatican without, you've got people running around spying and everything else. It's incredible. The Holy Father picks up the phone, John Paul the First, and calls Baggio directly in the Congregation for Bishops and said, I would like to see you. And Baggio answers him that he was busy. Right? Now, you've got to have, pardon me, but you've got to have a pair to be able to say to the Pope, excuse me, I'm busy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yan, tinawagan ni Pope John Paul I, si Cardinal Baguio, busy siya sa umaga.
What's the matter with you? I've got things to do. And this humble man said, then this afternoon, still busy. He said, then this evening. He said, you tell me you're going to be busy after 8 o'clock at night? What are you busy with at 8 o'clock at night? Right? And so Baggio had to go, and he did go. He arrived at 8 o'clock at night. Baggio entered the papal apartments, sat down, started talking to the Pope, and it was proposed, one supposes, because that's the reason he was called there, that he take Venice. Baggio evidently didn't like this. Because
nag-disobey na si Baggio sa desisyon ng Santo Papa.
he started screaming He started
at nagagalit. Lumakas ang tinig.
yelling at the Pope. There are 2 Swiss guards who attested to this. Who are
Kahit ang dalawang Swiss guards ay nakarinig pa.
standing right outside the door. Didn't hear what was being said, but they heard the loud voice of Baggio. That went on and on and on, and he refused. He wasn't going anywhere. Who knows what he said to the Pope and what insulting things he said to him. You've got to remember something else too. Just I forgot to mention something else. When Baggio is naming all of the bishops of the world, he's also naming all the cardinals of the world, because he's the one who decides who's going to be the Archbishop of New York,
Right.
the Archbishop of Mexico City, the Archbishop of Quebec, and all of these automatically become cardinals, right? So he had, in that election, he had a lot of friends. And Baggio also spent, listen to this, he spent his vacations, his summer vacations, visiting Asia and Africa, every place that there was a cardinal. He spent 2 or 3 days. So when they came to Rome, they had a friend in Rome. Anyway, he refused. He refused. He went out in a huff, slammed the door behind him. The Pope was dead 2 or 3 hours afterwards.
Yan. Ang likod sa pangyayari na namatay si Pope John Paul I, ika-33 araw mula na siya ay napili bilang Papa.
Now, the initial question is, was he murdered? And I gave you the answer of Cardinal Gon himself the following Sunday. He said there are many ways to murder a man. I believe, could he have been poisoned? Could he have, yes, any of that is possible. There's no question. Any of that is possible. It's happened in history, let me put it that way. But I believe he had a heart attack. He had a heart attack from the screaming and the yelling. That was it. He was found dead the next morning, but he had been dead for hours. So I think it was the acceleration of heart. The Pope, John Paul I, knows he's Pope. He understands who he is. This is a man whose life was devoted to the Holy Father, to the Holy See, right? To be mistreated by a cardinal that way, this is outrageous. This is outrageous. And I'm sure he took that to heart. There are many ways of killing a man. And the mayor had a heart attack. And that's the first thing that I thought about when Cardinal Gon came out with that. So that's the story. That's the story of murder in the 33rd degree. 33rd degree, of course, being the Masonic, John Paul II. Okay, so we've got another election. The same thing happens. The same thing happens, and Benelli comes up with the next solution. Wojtyła. I give my votes to Wojtyła. Good. So, you still got Villot as Secretary of State. John Paul II tells everyone, listen.
Walang binago si St. John Paul II sa Roman Curia kung sino ang nakaupo sa upo niya bilang Papa, nagpatuloy pa rin kahit si Sebastiano Cardinal Baguio.
This, you want to talk about a mistake in policy? Says to everyone in the Roman Curia, everyone in his government, stay right where you are. Stay right where you are. You can imagine Trump saying that to the Biden administration people. Stay right where you are. We're going to work together. Villot as Secretary of State. Baggio still continued in the Congregation for Bishops. It's as if nothing happened. Benelli goes to see him and says, Holy Father. Now, this was Benelli's candidate, right? Benelli says, Holy Father, Benelli is now the Cardinal of Florence. He said, you have to call in Gon and get his report and read his report. Housekeeping needs to be done immediately. Immediately. Well, I'm planning a trip to Mexico. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're planning a trip to Mexico. I don't want to get on the man's case, but here's the thing. John Paul II made 104 trips during his pontificate. What people don't realize is that each one of those trips cost 2 and 3 months of preparation. He didn't just get on a plane and start going. He wanted to know who is the bishop of this place, who is the bishop of that place, how many dioceses there are, seminaries, hospitals, He wanted to know everything, and many of the times learn to give speeches in a foreign language, a language he didn't know, right? All of this. So his whole world were those trips. And I'll give him this. I'm sure that he was convinced that what he was doing was God's will, and he was out to evangelize the world. He was to call the world to Christ. I believe he believed that. The problem was that while the cat's away, mice, or in this case, rats, will play. And they certainly did. Now, the good thing was, I shouldn't say the good thing was, let me just say what happened. Cardinal Erdo died, chain smoker, and he smoked those. They're so heavily perfumed. They're obnoxious. They're horrible. Anyway, so this was Paul VI, Secretary of State, and he was, as I say, just not a nice man. And you didn't want to cross him. You didn't want to cross him. Anyway, Cardinal Gagnon, or Archbishop Gagnon, brought up the dossier again to John Paul II. And he said, Holy Father, you must change Baggio from the Congregation of Bishops immediately, and your Secretary of State. Well, the Pope decided not to change the Secretary of State because he was in the last stages of cancer. So he wanted him to die with a certain dignity, and he didn't want him to be stressed with that. So when he died, the Pope named Casaroli to succeed Villo rather than Benelli. And he continued on his travels. Well, they were fine. They ran the entire show. Baggio continued just as before. And it's almost like, nah. You're not getting me. Yeah. I'm staying right where I am. So Gagnon asks me again, can we go see Pope John Paul II? I have an audience with him tomorrow. Again, to bring this dossier. I don't know how many copies of it he made, right? I said, certainly. Well, Pope Paul didn't accept it, so he had only 2 copies, I guess. I drove him there.
Hindi siya sekretary ni Cardinal Edward Gagnon, pero dahil kaibigan siya ang nag-drive para sa pakikipagkita at ibigay yung report kay Pope John Paul II na.
He went again up in the elevator. I'm waiting for him for the audience with John Paul II. He explained to John Paul II everything. He said that he came down not disappointed. And when he came down the elevator after the audience with the Pope, he came down angry.
Oh, so si Cardinal Edward Gagnon, no, lumabas at galit dahil yung report niya ay at yung sinabi niya na may plano sila, Holy Father, na i-assassinate ka. Di daw pinaniwalaan ng Santo Papa ang naturang report.
Gagnon, he was angry. I got out of the car to open up the door for him, and he didn't speak to me. He was so angry he didn't speak to me. We get in the car, we're driving. I said, and? He said, he's not going to do anything. He's not going to do anything. Wow. Is he going to read he said, who knows if he's going to do it? He already has it. He has it. He read it. He knows what it is. I'm suggesting what he has to do. He's not going to do anything. I said, so? He said, so what are you doing tomorrow morning? I said, at your orders. I had classes in the Gregorian, but Gagnon would ask a favor. I'd gladly cut the classes. He said, I want you to take me to the airport. You're going where? He said, I'm resigning. I spent 3 years on this whole thing. He said, I'm watching my church being destroyed and there's nothing I can do. He said, I was happy in the jungles of Colombia before I came here. He was in Colombia. He loved Colombia. He said, I'll go back to the jungles. He said, and preach on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. He gave retreats to small villages. He said, let me do that. He said, I can't deal with this jungle anymore. I drove him to the airport. But before I drove him to the airport, he said, can we go by? He said, I want you to swing by the Vatican. And we got there. And again, in Cortilis Andamos, so he said, here, take this letter up to Cardinal Villot. It's my resignation. I gave the letter. I said, is Cardinal Villot? And the man at the receptionist was a very antipatico type. No, His Eminence is busy and you have to have an appointment. I said, fine. Would you give this to His Eminence? I got halfway down the corridor. La Galleria. And from the door, I hear Villot, you. I turned around, it's only me. I said, yes, me? He said, you, come here. Not please, thank you. No, just, now.
Right.
I went back. I took my time, though. I walked back. I didn't run. I said, yes, Eminence, yes. What is it? He said, where is Gagnon? I said, right there. He's in my car in the Cortile. You tell him to get up here right now. I said, no. You can tell him if you want to. Why don't you go down and talk to him? I'm not going to go down and order him up. You want to talk to him? You go down and talk to him. He said, I'm telling you, go down and talk. I said, I'm telling you, no. And I turned and walked out. And I said, I hope he doesn't recognize me, because I was still working at the information office. They said that Gagnon knew as much as the Holy Ghost, right? As to what was going on. He investigated everything, right? He said, there's a plot against your life. And I said, and what did the Holy Father say? He said, who would want to kill the Pope?
So, ayun, as a investigation, sinabi talaga niya kay Pope John Paul II na may plano sila na assassinate ka. Yun ang sabi daw ni Pope John Paul, sino ba yung nagplanong papatay sa akin? At pinaniwalaan daw ang naturang report.
Gagnon said, I've got a list longer than my arm. But people who work for you, you can start there. Anyway, Gagnon left. When the Holy Father, the next year, before that, it wasn't even a year, the Vatican Bank scandal exploded. Mm-hmm. Why did it explode? Because nothing was done to prevent it. Right. It could have been taken care of. On the 13th of May, 1981, an assassin tried to kill.
Sandali lang, may nagtanong, sino po ba siya? Cardinal ba? Si Father Charles Moore. Kasama siya, kaibigan siya ni Cardinal Edward Gagnon na inutusan mula pa sa panahon ni Saint Paul VI na mag-imbestiga sino ang Infiltrator na Cardinal at Obispo sa Roman Curia, at sila ang may hawak sa naturang report.
The Pope in St. Peter's Square. The Holy Father was in Gemelli Hospital, I don't know how many months. And this is another, are we over the time limit?
We're way over, but I'm enjoying it, Father, so...
Are we okay? All right.
Yeah.
So the Holy
these stories.
So, ayan. Nasa aklat ito ni Father Charles, nakasulat ito, ang mga pangyayari, mga kapatid, na murderer and 33rd degree.
Cardinal Gagnon is dead. Monsignor Marini died in 2000.
Ayan. Ngayon daw sinong maniniwala sa kanya na nakasulat yan sa kanyang aklat, ang report, wala na si Cardinal Gagnon, patay na.
An assassin tried to kill the Pope in St. Peter's Square. The Holy Father was in Gemelli Hospital, I don't know how many months. And this is another, are we over the time limit?
We're way over, but I'm enjoying it, Father. So,
Are we okay? All right.
yeah.
So the Holy
I mean,
Father,
these stories need to be told. It's one
Well,
thing.
Sa interview nila ni Dr. Sa interview ito.
For me, as
Listen,
a younger man,
listen.
to write a book about it, it's another to talk to someone who was actually there and was part
Dr.
of
Miller.
these conversations. So,
I decided to write my book precisely because nobody in my family has ever lived past 72 years of age. And I said, I better write it now.
Yes.
I wanted it on the record. And you've had to have encountered this also. When I wrote the book, I said, these are my honest to God memories of what happened. And the only thing that I was a little bit fuzzy on were the exact dates of things because I didn't have them written down, but I knew what happened and I know the role that I played in things. A couple people criticized me because they were almost accusing me, kind of diplomatically, but not so much, of creating things that could not be proven. I said, I don't know how do I prove it? Cardinal Gagnon is dead. Monsignor Marini died in 2009. Well, out of the blue, I get a letter from Roberto De Mattei. He said, Father, I heard you were accused of not being forthright on this point, on that point. He said, may I call you? I said, sure. Well, he called me. He said, Monsignor Marini was a very good friend of mine, and so was Cardinal Gagnon. I happen to know that everything you're saying in your book, I just read your book, he said, for the second time, everything you're saying in your book is exactly what happened. I know it independently from both of them and from other sources. He said, would you permit me to write the introduction to your book?
there you go.
I said, are you kidding? I said, would I permit it? Absolutely. I said, but it's already written. He said, you can always have another one. Call one the preface and this one the introduction or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for him because he verified the claims that I'm making. I knew they were true, but you could doubt them if you wanted to.
And
With that, I don't-
Roberto De
he's one of
Mattei
the
is
finest
preeminent
in-
church historians of our time. I met him at the Angelicum shortly after Infiltration came, and he came over to me, and I was very in awe that I was meeting him. And he said, I read your book, Infiltration. By then, it hadn't been in Italian, it's just in English. And I was waiting for the boom, and he said, it was very good. I agree with it. For me, that was a big moment to hear Roberto De Mattei say that about the book.
That was quite a compliment
For me,
because-
for
and
me,
he's
it was
the man
it was
to make
big.
Yeah.
At may party dito na di na naparinig natin noong nabaril si St. John Paul II, nadala siya sa Isyu at nang gumising siya, pinahanap agad si Cardinal Edward Gagnon at pinabalik doon sa Vatican. So bumalik si Cardinal Edward Gagnon at inilagay siya sa Prefect Congregation for Family. Yon, no? At so pagkatapos yan, hiniling niya na kung maari tanggalin sa Roman Curia agad-agad si Cardinal Sebastiano Baguio ang lumabas sa resulta na isang miyembro ng Italiano na Freemasonry. Yung agad-agad na tanggalin, nagiging 2 taon pa umano. 2 taon pa na aksyonan bago tinanggal sa posisyon. So kaya ipanalangin po natin mga kapatid ang kasalukuyang CD vacante, ang kaluluwa ni Pope Francis, at ang susunod na pagpili ng susunod na Vicar of Christ, ang magiging servant of all servants mula sa mga cardinals. Ito ba'y infiltrator? Ito ba'y conservative? O ito'y progressive? Kaya ipanalangin po natin.
To make his message known is our